it's like I said, it's disappointing. The outcome is disappointing. We wanted to win today, so for our supporters, for the club, but we didn't do that. So whatever I think about the performance, it's still the outcome that you kind of sits on you. I think our general football was good, was decent. I think we controlled the game for the most part, but we know that we're a team who can do that. It's about us now, not now, but over the course of time, trying to get from where we are to where we want to get to, and to do that, we're still not, as we're laser focused on the details, the small things that get you from where we are to becoming a team that contends. And credit to Arsenal, they're there now. They're a team that does deal with the details well, and we don't.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. It is episode 176. I am your host, Andrew, and that was Ange Postecoglou following a 3-2 defeat for Tottenham Hotspur in the North London Derby this morning. This is going to be a spicy one, I've got a feeling. We've got a lot to discuss coming out of a North London Derby. We will also chat about Spurs Women getting a late equalizer from Beth England to get a 1-1 draw against Brighton. We will start by throwing it out to Caroline. She is at CJ Stefko. Caroline, I don't know. What else can we say? That was tough to watch, right?
Yeah, both games really just kind of frustrating watches, because I felt like in both games we could have gotten something out of it. I mean, we did in the women's game get a point, to be fair, but definitely I feel like I expected more out of both matches. And just feel like I've gone through kind of a range of emotions this morning / afternoon, kind of trying to process, what went wrong, like think of it in the macro sense as well. Because I think for the men's team especially, it's getting to the point in the season where we have to be thinking that way and not dwelling too much on the individual results. Because we know we're in a rebuild and these things are going to happen, but yeah, just a tough morning to be a Spurs fan, not gonna lie.
Yeah, it was pretty grueling. Scott is also with us at Scott G Bird. Scott, how did you make your way through this? I know you went to the gym before we decided to pod today. Did you work off some of the steam at the gym, I hope?
Yeah, a good workout never hurts after a result like that. But at least on the men's side, I think if we look at the women's side, I can take the point when you take a look at the overall of what's happening over there. But one of these matches was a North London Derby, right? So it's always going to take the precedence, I think, from an emotional perspective, if you're looking at both teams equally, right? But yeah, on the men's side, I didn't really expect a result today. I felt myself thinking often, this is one of those matches where we're clearly not the better team and we've got a long way to go to catch up to our opponent, but it's a derby and you never know. And it just kind of reminded me of how Spurs were for a long time up until really 14, 15, maybe 15, 16, I would say more than anything, where we started to have some belief and started to catch up to our neighbors, right? But it just felt like those pre-Pochettino days where the only thing we had going for us was that it was a derby, but, we were up against a much better team. So I didn't expect much. I think when you take a step back and start to look at the match and you look at the data that comes from this match, you start to think, man, we really could have gotten a result, right? Which makes you feel a little bit differently, but ultimately probably the result that was deserved when these two teams were going to face one another.
And bursting through the wall like the Kool-Aid man, we have Mr. Todd at T_Kasho also joining us here to, I'm sure, take a machete to the PGMOL. Todd, what is up, my friend?
Oh, yeah. That's what's up. No, man, any day you get together and watch your team play some football and then talk about it with your mates is a good fucking day. Unfortunately, days like today's are too often ruined by momentum-killing, questionable decision-making from people not wearing either uniform. And so that makes for an interesting post-match conversation. Here we are.
Yes, indeed. Here we are. We will get to the officiating decisions that were or were not made in this match. I want to start off, though, by talking about the lineup, because it was a little bit different this week. And we had some discussions in our group chat about midfield specifically. And Scott, you and I have gone back and forth on this midfield and just kind of how interesting the decisions are and how there haven't been a lot of midfielders that have stood out like for lengthy periods of time. It's been very stop-start, and Ange got this a little bit pre-match, which I think is a clip that we're going to get to. But before we even do, just Scott, your thought on the idea of Bentancur and Højbjerg in that midfield with Madison. I think this was maybe the only surprise. We did get Ben Davis in for Destiny Udogie, which I think was more expected. Front three of Son, Werner, and Kulusevski. But the midfield was, I think, for some, at least, I won't include myself in that because I kind of thought this might happen, but for some, it might have been a surprise. What did you think of Ange's choice for that starting midfield?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I both felt that having two more defensive-minded midfielders, call it a six, if you will, was wise in this match. I didn't expect us to sit back in a block and try to counter. Like, we're never going to change the way we play, but I thought that having two sixes would allow us to capitalize in defensive transitions in the middle of the park a little bit more against a team that was going to be looking to get forward. So, and it just so happens we got a variation of that. It just, I was calling for Basuma Bentancur and you for Basuma PEH, and it ended up being Bentancur PEH, right, that we saw in that pairing. So I think we met in the middle, right, which was nice. But ultimately, as we learned, 2 hours later, it wasn't quite enough to make an impact. And in fact, I thought defensive transitions was a big part of why we lost this game, as opposed to why we didn't, win it like I thought we might.
You mean we weren't able to have two defensive sixes play the ball forward? I don't know, man. Like it's tough. I'm glad we saw the rotation here. I honestly am, because there's been a lot of people that have been calling for PEH. And now we see, I think in large part, why PEH comes on in the role that he does for this squad and in this system. It doesn't necessarily play to his strengths. I was surprised Bentancur didn't necessarily play more advanced than he did, and didn't really get involved in the attack as much as I wanted him to from that position. But I think, honestly, a big part of that was the assignment, as you well called out, Scotty, is I think that they were looking to control the defensive transitions. The problem is they just didn't really have as much vision from that position as I wanted them to.
I think some of the nature, though, of why Bentancur is better, I think, on the ball than PEH. But PEH is going to play those more advanced and some would say risky, I would say daring passes forward than either Bentancur or Basuma. I thought when Basuma came in, things kind of slowed down again. It was more recycle the ball, get it out wide. When it comes back through the middle, he's just going to switch the play kind of slowly. I thought I really liked this midfield combo. And Caroline, for me, I thought that it had a lot to do with why Spurs were actually able to control not only the possession in this game, but really control the momentum kind of for the most part. And for those who are just going to look at the score line in this game and see that Spurs were down 3-0 at halftime, you're not going to realize that they kind of kicked ass throughout. Like, there were only brief periods of time after the break where Arsenal really had the momentum of the game. The rest of the time, Spurs had it.
Especially if you just watch the highlight package that NBC put together, because they didn't even show the Mickey Van de Ven goal, the offside chance. They didn't even show it. There's like, oh, Spurs had something chalked off in the first half, and hey, let's show this Saka goal. Like, it doesn't show the context that led to that chance. It's very misleading, and that's a big frustration for me in the watches of the Premier League this year, Andrew, is the fact that it just seems like the scoreline isn't necessarily telling the story of the match a lot of the time.
Well, I do think that's true in the sense that it felt like from open play, we were definitely the stronger team, I would say, throughout the match. Maybe Arsenal had a couple of pockets of dominance, but for the most part, we were the ones who were creating chances. Still not enough for my liking, and I feel like the attack is it's getting very stale, it feels like, at this point in the season. But, defensively, from open play, I feel like we controlled it pretty well. And I think, having two, like you said, more defensive-minded midfielders did contribute to that. The issue for me with that strategy is that I did feel like from the start, we were a little too defensive if we wanted to actually go out and win this game, especially with it being the home derby. I really wanted us to be just very focused on getting the 3 points, not a draw. And
Well,
maybe that's just me being an idealist, because I know a lot of people going into this game were like, a draw is a good outcome because of the form that Arsenal are in. But I just can't feel that way about this game specifically. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
From that perspective, I think I would have liked to see Sarr get the start, just because he would bring a little bit of pace and energy and just impetus, I feel like, to our attack that we didn't quite have, with those two sort of six-minded midfielders.
Is this Ange somewhat recognizing that we've got multiple games coming up and we're trying to save some legs? I mean, there's a chance at that. To be honest, like, you calling for a win as opposed to a draw, Kaz, I think is a really valuable point. And it kind of leads on to, like, my biggest concern about this entire Spurs team at the moment is we have no offensive identity. And it's really, 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 really hard to watch, because we spend all the time in the world in the opponent's box and have no fucking idea what we're supposed to do when we're there.
Well,
Yeah, Todd,
and the thing is, if we're going to talk about, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if we're thinking about the stretch of games that we have coming up, at the start of the season, I had looked at the schedule and thought to myself, we really needed to have banked up points before this section, because it was always going to be rough, even with not knowing that we were going to have the Chelsea game and the City game shoehorned in, at the last minute. So to me, knowing that we had such a difficult fixture schedule ahead and we were coming off of rest, this was the game I felt like we needed to attack and get the 3 points, knowing that maybe in the next few games we don't, but at least it would mean we had the pride of winning the home derby, possibly scuppering Arsenal's title chances. Like, I could be serene about whatever happened in the next few games if we had gotten the win today, and now I don't feel that way. So that's I think the main disappointment for me.
Yeah, I think the main disappointment for me, Andrew, aside from what we're going to come on to in terms of the alternative storylines here, the most frustrating thing for me is that going into the match against Chelsea, it's not like we have. Going into Chelsea, it's not like we have a better idea of what we're going to do offensively. One. And as I say that, I want to caveat it with the fact that Timo Werner hurting his leg, I think, is the best fucking thing that could have happened to this team, because now we got Richarlison back in the middle and Sonny out wide, because Sonny's been fucking non-existent. We've been playing with 10 men, but by and large for a lot of the last month, and that's been tough.
Yeah, Todd, missing a center forward never helps your cause, right? And Son, unfortunately, has been non-existent through the middle. I hate to ever pick on our prince, right? Or our king now, but he is not what we need in the center of the attack, right? It just isn't working. You said earlier that our offensive identity, or the lack thereof, is our biggest problem, and you're spot on. I mean, I do, contrary to popular belief, enjoy diving into stats, right? And there are some stats from this match that tell us everything we need to know. And Andrew, I hope I'm not beating the rundown, right? But the 2.37 expected goals to their 1.08 tells you a lot in itself. But 14 shots, 2 on target from Tottenham, unacceptable. Big chances missed, 3 of them, unacceptable. 496 completed passes on our end to 277. What I'm getting at, the tail is us just continuing to recycle the ball around the final third and do absolutely nothing with it. We have no creative presence. And as I've said for so many months in a row now, when you have that much of the ball and your fullbacks are on it a ton in the final third, you're going to get beat in transitions a lot, like, because of your lack of ability to create chances. So if you're going to have all of the ball, let the fullbacks have a ton of it in the final third, create nothing, you're going to be exposed and you're going to lose matches, right? You've got to score goals in the end system, and that's not happening at all. So until we get that figured out, and I'm not even talking about today, I again, not surprised that we shipped 3 goals quickly today, but until we get the offense figured out, it's not going to be good for Tottenham.
I'm really glad you bring this up, Scott. And no, you're not stepping on the rundown. This is kind of where I wanted to go with statistically this game. And this is kind of where we started this conversation. Statistically, this game looked way better than the obvious result. Another statistic, and I'll bring XG back into this for you, Scott. Christian Romero generated more than twice as much XG as any one Arsenal player did. He's a fucking center back. Ange brought this up in the pre-match press conference, talking about the front three and how that's the area of the pitch where he still feels this team needs a little bit more. They need more goal production from there. If the expected goals, or in today's case, one of the actual goals is coming from the defense, that's not good enough. That's not a good thing. Now, the way that this match went, and I want to kind of walk us through this, because look, the Saka goal is the result of the way that Spurs play. That's the open play goal, and it also comes after what we thought was a penalty incident. And look, Ange even said maybe we shouldn't be worrying so much about a decision not given on the other end of the pitch and focus on what's happening, on our end. And I'll back him on that. I'll agree with that. That's a fair point for a coach to make, but also that's your job to get them to do that as well. That said, the other two goals, piece goals, and I'm not going to really like the Højbjerg own goal is a tough one to take. For the narrative, it sucks because I think Højbjerg has been a lot better than he's been given credit for this year. And I did think he was the right man to start today. And I thought, other than the own goal, I thought he was okay. But the set piece defending is what is just, I don't have any other word for it than disgusting. And it's been all season long. And I know that a lot of people are calling for Gianni Vio to come back. People don't realize that he's the offensive piece coach, or was the offensive set piece coach. It's not, he did not work on the defensive set pieces. This team needs to both have better offensive set pieces and defensive set pieces. And Todd, I know you're grinning at that because that's how it is. Before we talk about set pieces though, I want to hear from Ange. This was Ange after the match. He was asked about set pieces, and I'm a little concerned at this answer. I want to know what you guys think.
It's understanding where you are as a football team, and if I thought fixing defensive set pieces was the answer to us bridging the gap, then I'd put all my time and effort into that. But it's not where we're at. For us, it's about we're not as focused on the details of not just set pieces. A lot of moments in games where we don't sense that you give the good opposition the time and the space to do things, then they're going to hurt you. And I think they maybe had 4 attempts on goal in the first half. They scored 3. So I don't think it's just about one part of it. I think it's a bigger, broader picture than that. But our defensive set pieces for those first 2 were very poor. So, but there's a lot more than that to fix.
So here's where I'm at with this. I can be okay with allowing the goal to Bukayo Saka in the way that they did. It was a counter-attacking move. We've seen Spurs concede from counterattacks, and if you're going to play that front-footed Ange ball style, you're going to occasionally give up a goal on a counterattack. If Spurs had given up half of the goals in this game that they did on set pieces, you have a point. And if you don't give up any of them, you win the match just based on this. I know that doesn't really play out that way. The game's going to play out differently based on the scoreline, but they gave up 2 goals on set pieces, Todd. Like why is there not enough focus on this from the coaching staff? And is that going to be an issue as we, not only for the run in, but going forward into next season?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. And one thing about Ange that we've come to learn is that, he approaches most everything with a certain sense of pragmatism that, as Spurs fans, like, we greatly appreciate, especially after having some Italian hoodoo on our club for the last few years. Like, you just look at something where it's like, oh, you mean the easy answer is probably the right answer, Ange? Okay, well, let's see how that works out. And, if we need to adjust accordingly, we will. But the point that I want to make it about set pieces in general, Andrew, is that if we did, I've called out on this very pod the lack of offensive identity and it being a massive issue for us. But if you did say that we had any sort of offensive game plan, by and large, what we've seen is it's get to the byline and try to force crosses back in, especially low crosses back in. And ultimately, if that's your game plan, what you're going to see is a lot of offensive corner opportunities. And we've had those, and he's called out that that's Ryan Mason's area to work on, in addition to other things. And we've been woeful. We've been truly poor. On the defensive side of it, I don't really know whose responsibility that is. Ange is kept pretty tight-lipped about it, but that's been subpar, to say the least. I would say, if I'm not mistaken, bottom 2 in the league, Andrew, is not good, man. So
yeah, from an XG standpoint, from an XG standpoint, I think there are only two teams worse in allowed on goals allowed, expected goals allowed on set pieces. But I think the other part of this might be, and this is both to an offensive and defensive standpoint, is also a little bit of a personnel problem, because I don't think we have a whole lot of height in our team. We have some tall guys. Mickey Van de Ven is tall, but can't really jump, to be perfectly honest. Like I honestly think Lucas Moura could jump higher than Mickey Van de Ven.
Yeah,
at times.
Dude. I mean, our tall guys aren't great in the air. Like Romero's good, but not exceptional, right? He's not Van Dijk in the air, and no one's going to say that, right?
You know, this is why I kind of see where Ange is coming from, because I think the defensive set pieces are not something that's easily fixable, especially this late in the season. Like, we have the personnel we have the bad habits that we have. I think for him, probably the focus is on improving the attack, where we just need some tweaks. You know what I mean? So this quote makes sense to me from that perspective. I do think going into next season, we definitely need to get a specialist coach for this, continual habit of conceding on set pieces.
I absolutely agree with that, and I think from Ange's perspective as well, I would totally agree. I think he's basically to add subtext where I have no business doing so. He's basically saying that if we score the 5 fucking chances that we should have scored, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
Yeah, honestly, I think it ties in, and again, this video from Ange may be forthcoming, right? But he does mention somewhat that he needs to see more Christian Romero's, and I had mentioned on Twitter that what I think he meant by that was not so much like heart or passion or desire to play for the badge, but mental focus. People who never ever turn off for a full 90 minutes, and I think we've seen a lot of that at Spurs for quite a while, if I'm honest, and that directly leads to an inefficiency from a set piece perspective. It is one of the little things that has to be done perfectly. A set piece is full of them, right? But it just that mental edge that I think we're maybe lacking. And I think like more height is great, sure, but ultimately you should be able to defend set pieces regardless of the variations of height on your team, right? You just need to be well drilled and well prepared and focused. And I just don't think we're seeing that.
Maybe keep somebody out of Vicario's face. Maybe make sure that Ben White's not literally standing on his toes and trying to undo his fucking keeper gloves. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? Our goalkeeper.
I've been saying that all season, though. I've been saying that.
It's been awful this year.
I've been saying that all season, though. We've seen Vicario get harassed on defensive set pieces a number of times, and no adjustment has been made. And that, to me, is an issue not of personnel, but when you see something like that happening continuously over and over again, that is a coaching problem. And the other part of this, to me, is that is a coaching problem is if your players are switching off and you say, and I don't, for the listeners, the bit that Scott is alluding to, Postecoglou made some comments about wanting to see basically more Cuti Romero types out there. And I don't have that audio to play. I didn't cut that part up, but that's also a coaching issue to me. If you have players that are switching off and having defensive lapses on set pieces, coach them to not do that.
Fair, but then it's been a coaching issue for the last 4 fucking managers, Andrew. Like, this is not.
I hear you, but I'm talking about this manager and what they're doing right now, and not just in general. We're talking about on a specific type of thing that we have seen over and over again. We said it. Only 2 teams worse in the Premier League at allowing expected goals against from set pieces. That's not good enough. And I think the part where I really take issue with Ange is if you see a part of your team that is not performing well, and you say, well, it's not just that one part. No, I get that it's not just one part, but this one part is really glaring and really like it's you have to put makeup over it to fix the problem a little bit. You can't just let the pimples sit there on the front of your nose. You know what I'm saying? Like it's frustrating.
Yeah, I do think regarding Vicario, players marking him so heavily on these set pieces, we did see for a few games after this started to become a problem that we were making an effort to sort of protect him. You'd have someone like Romero focused on cutting out that player who was trying to mark Vicario, but then that led to us leaving other players open. So it's kind of a situation where I don't think in this case Ben White was doing anything that by the letter of the law was, illegal or could be considered a foul. But, there have been times in the past where you could argue that. And so that's a situation where we need the officials to do their job so that our players don't have to be, doing double duty, which they can't do. They can't be in two places at once.
All right. Do I get to go now, Andrew?
You mean on the officiating?
Yeah. Is that the door being opened?
Well, I think it is. But before we do, I mean, is there anything else specifically about the play, the game that we want to check? Because I do want to leave officiating last because it's going to be a big chunk of this. But I don't know that there's anything else that can be said about the game itself. I thought that, like I said, I thought
existence since he's come back from his injury. Shout out to Pedro Porro for being able to get healthy and get back on that right side and play extremely well. We really miss Destiny Udogie. Shout out to Big Ben Davis for doing what he does, but I wouldn't be upset if we saw Romero against our guy Emerson against Chelsea. That was tough.
Real quick on that too, Todd. I think I had pointed out on Twitter that Ben Davies took up a poor position for that second goal, and what ends up happening is he's moving right to left, Saka's moving in the opposite direction, and it becomes very easy to just instep him, right? Because they're moving in opposite directions, and he's only moving in opposite directions because he's trying to recover the space after some poor positioning, as he's honestly tracking right down the middle, a foot away from Van de Ven when Saka's out with the entire field in front of him. And I'm not picking on Ben Davies. I think it's really hard when you've been playing center back for almost every minute that you've played all season long, right? To then play left back. It honestly looks like the exact run that he made as if he were a center back, right? That ended up leading to him needing to recover. But we missed Udogie, and unfortunately, I don't think Ben Davies had a great game. So
yeah, the Ben Davis giving up that goal, I thought looked a lot like Mickey Van de Ven trying to defend a counter-attacking goal at times. Yeah. Like it was just it's hard to do that. Like I don't disagree. I don't think Ben Davis had the best goal, but I don't think Ben Davis had the best game. But like when he's put in that position, it's a hard play to defend when you're being counterattacked against.
But I think one of the things that I point out with that is the small detail that we seem to miss often as a club, right? When you're out of position, it's the details that you're not executing on. And we conceded because of it. The best teams in the world, the cities, unfortunately, the Arsenals now, right? They're not bringing guys in who have mental lapses, right? And you can coach that out of people, but those teams execute the small details, and that's why they very rarely drop points, right? And that's the biggest gap between us and everybody who's contending for the league.
100% agree. Guardiola doesn't get, unless it's Messi. No, but even Messi, Guardiola doesn't get beat to the open side of the goal there. Like that was tough to watch.
We did see a massive lapse from David Raya, to be fair. It's not necessarily true that they've made 100% great recruitment choices.
And here's the last thing I'll say about that. The David Raya lapse was also partially because we pressed so damn well. Like we forced them into mistakes through our press a number of times in this game. So I don't want to take anything away from how well Spurs played despite being down 3-0 and not being able to come all the way back. Like I think it's going to be hard for a lot of fans to take that and digest and swallow, but like Spurs actually played pretty well in this match, and with a little bad bounces of the ball and bad luck, like shit can go downhill really quickly, and it did. Sorry, Caroline, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to add to that this is exactly why I wanted Richarlison to start, because I think if we have a player like him pressing the keeper constantly, we could have, created some more chances that way, because we know that's something he's really good at. But the last thing I wanted to add about the game is just that I agree with Todd. I feel like James Maddison is becoming a real issue. If we look at the captains in this match, you've got Cootie putting in, player of the match performance for Spurs. And Son didn't have the greatest game overall, but he did show up in the moment when he was called on and had a really great penalty. And I didn't see the same sort of, like Scott has said, the mental sharpness from Maddison. I feel like he was the only one who kind of got caught up in the derby emotions of it all, and was, not quite as focused on playing his game. You know what I mean?
Let's send this to Todd now. Todd, I want to let you go off on the officiating, but I don't know if you want to start on just one decision. Like which of the myriad things do we want to start on, or do you just want to have a minute and a half to rant here?
No, I want it to be rooted in things of recent memory. So we'll just say that there are specific referees that have a specific way of officiating games that has a tendency to make momentum shift on a dime. And one of those referees is John Brooks, who we got to see twice with in the VAR booth in critical matches for us this year, both in in the Chelsea match and the West Ham match. That was our VAR friend there, and he was also in the middle in that West Ham match that we felt like we should have won in April, but ended up a 1-1 draw. Michael Oliver was in the middle for that Chelsea match. He was also in the middle today. And these gentlemen have a way of making calls at times that just seem to really suck the air out of any room Spurs are in. And what's tough as a fan to watch there is you think of a handful of decisions that change the complexion of a season. And between John Brooks and Michael Oliver's 15 decisions over the course of 3 matches, there's been about a 20-point swing for Spurs if you want to throw a dart at it. And what's really hard for me is the fact that you have narrative affirming decisions, as I've talked about several times on this podcast, happening all over the place, and everybody feeling hard done by. And the narrative in football fandom is, oh, it's the rub of the green. It happens to everybody. Well, it's like it fucking shouldn't. Okay. Could you imagine being a Coventry City fan right now after what the job that was done on you in that FA Cup so that there was a Manchester derby for the final? Get the fuck out of here. And I'm over here having a conversation about Michael Oliver shit in the bed, or John Brooks deciding to go play Mario Paint and fuck my Spurs out of 3 points at home. And I'm really struggling to try to find where other fans of other Premier League teams, Spurs aside, we're going to leave the agenda piece aside for right now, but other fans of other Premier League teams that have this happen to them on a week in, week out basis don't come back and say, we deserve better. Ownership says, what the fuck are we going to do about it, PGMOL? And the only conclusion that I can draw from that, Andrew, is that these are narrative affirming decisions that essentially affirm the rub of the green in the proper way for the sponsors. We'll say it that way. So I don't really know what you want to do about this particular situation. And I don't really know what I want to do about this particular situation. I'm just tired of not talking about it in terms of it being a real thing and people bringing up tinfoil hats and shit when I'm over here watching these things happen week in and week out across the table.
The specific incident of the Kulusevski penalty, I think, is the most egregious one. The Kulusevski penalty shout. Let's first of all get this out of the way. There's not a Madison penalty shout after that. I think that Madison, how can I put this delicately? Madison's going to have to do a lot of work in order to get himself any kind of good grace, because that man flops more than a fish at times, and he's built himself. You want to talk about a narrative? He's built himself a narrative with some
He's
of
second on the team in flops to Richie.
To Richie, yes, and honestly, I think he's challenging that top spot at this point, just because of playing time. So I'll wipe that out. But before that, Kulusevski gets fouled, and look, Todd, you want to talk about NBC and narratives? NBC came on right after the game and said, I one of the Robbies, I think it was Musto, gets on there and says that's a penalty. The only reason it's not called a penalty is because Kulusevski gets tripped up, gets fouled in the box, somehow keeps his feet and completes the pass to Madison, but then goes down after. Like he by
right, so he gets penalized for not flopping, and so then
Yes.
that's why I'm over here going. And we saw it on the second penalty. It was actually VAR called when fucking Declan Rice decides to give the old Looney Tunes kick to Ben Davies right in front of Michael Oliver. He's literally whistles in his mouth. His eyes are on the play, and he goes, nothing to see here, guys. And like, it really feels like, Andrew, that the narrative after the Liverpool fuck up by the referees has been, if it's actually a penalty on Spurs, VAR will buzz me and say so. And that's really hard.
Here's the thing,
though.
Ange commented about VAR after the match, Scott, and I'm gonna get to you. But Ange said, and this was like, and another one. I probably should have tried to pull this clip, but Ange said that officiating is no longer done in the stadium. Like, he was very blunt about it. He just said officiating is now done down the road. It's why he doesn't celebrate goals anymore. And that decision, or lack thereof, by Michael Oliver to not look at Ben Davies getting kicked in the groin by Declan Rice and go down in the box, that decision, which is right in front of his face and the whistle's in his mouth, that decision is purely what Ange is talking about. The game's not being officiated by the officials on the pitch at times. It's being officiated down the road. Scott, I'll let you take over from there.
That's exactly what I wanted to point out was that, Todd, you reference calls that are not made. Look at Nottingham Forest and the 3 calls they didn't get. Now, I'm not condoning their behavior post match there, right? But those are 3 times a call's not made. It's happening in way more instances than just Spurs matches. Now, why I think that is happening, and I talked about it in the group chat, is when VAR is checking everything, you call a penalty, you don't, it doesn't fucking matter. It's getting reviewed, right? So what's happening is I think they're just subconsciously not making it a decision consistently, right? Because they know that someone else is going to end up making that decision for them. There's no point to either call it or not, and it's not called. Referees are essentially freezing, knowing that someone else is going to do their job and they're going to pass the buck.
And it matters, though. It really does matter. And the reason why I say that is because, like, Michael Oliver is supposed to be the best referee that England has to offer right now. Either him or Anthony Taylor. Giggle. But we find ourselves asking them to make the most rudimentary of calls and them choosing not to. When Michael Oliver chooses not to blow the whistle on a play, it says something because of the cachet that he has garnered over the years. Now, where that's problematic is the fact that that's also why things like Cuti Romero's red card in the Chelsea match is something that is looked at. And as we've seen throughout the rest of the season, this has happened on numerous occasions, and there's been a myriad of different calls depending on who's playing and who the fucking referee is. So what I'm saying is, if you're telling me that Michael Oliver is the best you have to offer, and he keeps making narrative affirming decisions on the field that are clearly wrong in the moment, that makes it really tough for me to have any faith in the product that you're putting on the field, PGMOL. So, like, what am I supposed to do, especially as a fan from fucking 8,000 miles away that wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch that?
Honestly, I don't disagree with what you're saying. It never was my intention, or did I say that he should or shouldn't have made the call in the moment, right? I'm just saying that the calls are not being made in the moment because of VAR. It's as confusing to a referee as it is to the fan at this point, right? So a call is not made. It is handled elsewhere. I think this, again, right or wrong, it's just exactly what's happening, right? And VAR is the bigger issue. Like we talked about the line that's drawn on the Van de Ven goal, right? And people are talking, oh, they're drawing the line in his foot and not the ass of the defender that maybe keeps him on. But those lines are being drawn in every single match. It's not just in Spurs matches. Lines are dissected. They're subjective at times, but it's happening everywhere, right? So VAR is the issue. Like, I think I had said on Twitter, I don't want to talk about the refereeing. Specifically, I don't want to talk about how a refereeing beat us today, because we beat ourselves. We gave up 2 set-piece goals and we're not prepared in a defensive transition. We also didn't take 3 big chances that we should have, right? We beat ourselves. I don't want to talk about how individual refereeing in the North London derby affected the outcome, but I'll talk all day long about VAR because it's a mess from top to bottom, all 20 teams. And honestly, I think the only way you recover from VAR at this point is to scrap it and have referees start making decisions again for themselves. I don't see another option, but it's a mess.
That's not going to happen. But I want to let Caroline jump in. She's had a point to make.
Well, for me, the big issue that we're seeing with VAR is that, like Ange has said, it feels like referees are reluctant to make a call in the moment because they know it's going to be checked. The problem with that is that, in a case like Ben Davis getting kicked in the nuts, very obvious, easy one to fix. But if you look at one like Kulusevski's possible penalty shout, where it's much more subjective, that's when VAR, the hurdle they have to supposedly cover is clear and obvious error. And so if they can't, objectively say this is a clear and obvious error, they can't overturn the non-call. So
you're making,
they put themselves in a bad position,
You're making the exact point that I was going to make. And we see this, weirdly enough, in all the other sports that have replay review. Like the official has to make the call that he believes and not rely on some other guy telling him he might have been wrong. Now, what happened with the Ben Davis, as Caroline so eloquently put it, getting kicked in the nuts, which I never thought we would get Caroline to say kicked in the nuts on this podcast. And I'm glad that we did. Thank you for that. But what we saw with that is such an obvious error. And Michael Oliver is told, hey, buddy, you might want to go look at that one. He goes over to the monitor and takes, I think, 3.7 seconds to realize, oh, I did fuck that up, and then has to go call the penalty. Like, it only when it is so obvious. Now, the Kulusevski shout is not going to get that, because you're not going to get a VAR official down the road to say, hey, Michael, I think you might want to look at that again because it's close, and also the nature of what we already did. Well, but it's also the nature of what we already discussed is Kulusevski kind of gets penalized.
The first match.
No. He gets penalized for keeping his feet there. That's the problem. Like he gets penalized for trying to do the right thing and stay on his feet and not dive like anyone else.
Also, I think the fact that he was able to kind of get a pass off worked against him, because I think.
But it doesn't mean it's not a foul. It doesn't mean it's.
I know.
It doesn't mean he didn't get fouled.
I think it could still be a foul because you can argue that he wasn't able to actually make a drive to the goal himself. That was the disadvantage he was put at by that movement. So
you can make an argument that there's a foul because there was contact in the box, and ultimately, regardless of what happened, he fell over. What do you want? I don't like.
Yeah.
I just if we're watching,
we're agreeing. We're agreeing.
I know.
Todd.
I just and again, I think that's the biggest frustrating thing, Scotty, is the lack of consistency.
Well, no, I agree with everything you're saying, and this is where I'm getting at with the non-calls, right? Imagine the group of referees, the PGMOL is sitting down and they're talking about this subject in general. I firmly believe that the discussion centers around the idea that for a penalty, for example, with a penalty, it's much easier to not make the call, let the game play on, and let VAR check, right? As opposed to stopping, blowing your whistle, calling a penalty, stopping the game, and then VAR saying, oh shit, never mind, not a penalty, goal kick, right? That's way more disruptive to the game. And so I think if they're sitting down and saying, what do we do in 50-50 decisions? Don't make the call. And I think that's exactly what's happening. And it's not right. It's affecting the game. It's sucking the life out of football. But I think that from the perspective of logic, it makes more sense in a 50-50 decision for them to not make the call. And that's why it's continuously happening all the time. Now, and sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
No, jump in.
No, I do think that when it comes to narrative affirming decisions, as Todd likes to put it, and I don't disagree with him, it's happening in the VAR room, and that's probably the compounding issue that we're discussing here. Calls are not made because of what I just said. It goes to VAR, and the narrative can be decided very subjectively. ESPN had put together a pretty cool article that broke down how every team has benefited from subjective calls, right? I looked at Spurs, I looked at Aston Villa, and I looked at Arsenal. It's Arsenal and then Aston Villa is who we're competing with for our goals, right? But Aston Villa is a +2 in terms of goals overturned in their favor. We're at a 0, and Arsenal's at a +1. But then it breaks down subjective calls, and it's not great. Subjective decisions for Aston Villa are 4 and against are 2. and my computer's running slow, but
I think the thing to take away more than
Let him
anything
finish.
is what you said earlier, Scott. Well, I'm trying to vamp here while his
no.
computer
Go ahead, and go ahead.
fires up.
My stuff's loading. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh,
I think that your point earlier that you made about like we're having this whole officiating conversation like everyone's going to be doing in their post-match analysis of this, and it is to say if you don't give up 2 set pieces, you win the game. If you don't, there's so many other ways that this game goes differently, and the thing that sucks for Spurs is that of course it's against Arsenal, and of course it sucks to lose to them when they're in a title race and we're not, and we're fighting for 4th. All the narratives, all the bullshit narratives, and I hate that. Not narrative affirming decisions, but narratives that go along with a North London derby and being put in this position. They all really rear their ugly head after a result like this because of the way that it played out. Especially, look, I want to kind of give Spurs some credit. They fell down 3-0 and damn near came back to get a point or even win the match. Like I don't come away from this match all doom and gloom like many. And I want to is if you're out there calling for Spurs to send out one of those tweets that calls out the PGMOL, especially if you're an aggregator doing that, that's chicken shit. Teams that do that are chicken shit. I think that we as Spurs and we as Spurs fans are better than that. And we need to show that we're better than that. We're going to fight through all of this fucking shit with officiating and narrative affirming decisions. And eventually we're going to get to the main honor and to that top prize through all of this. And I'm ready for that day because we're not sending out tweets calling out the PGMOL as a club. At least I hope we're not. When I log off this podcast, I better not see that from Spurs because I will call it chicken shit.
They're letting guys like us do it. We're aggrieved.
Right. Well,
yeah, be aggrieved. I implore you, be aggrieved. But the club better not do that because I'll call that chicken shit if it happens.
Spurs made millions of dollars today. Daniel Levy is having a tough one. He's going to wear this a little bit, and then he's going to see the receipts tomorrow morning, and he's going to wipe his tears with them. We're going to be okay from a Tottenham standpoint. From a Spurs fan standpoint, this one's going to hurt for a little bit because there was so much more that we could have done. Well, thank goodness we get football soon.
And on the subject of being aggrieved, I'll finish this little. So Aston Villa had 4 in favor, 2 against them. Overturned decisions or subjective is what they're being categorized here. Arsenal had 2 in favor, 1 against. Spurs had 2 in favor, 5 against. So I do think there's something to what Todd is saying, right? Now, subjective decisions are being overturned and not overturned in every single Premier League game. It is not an attack on Tottenham Hotspur, but the data suggests that there are times where there is a narrative affirming decision being made, right? So I do think there's some truth to what Todd is saying. It's incredibly far too subjective and a moving target to ever be able to paint that into a perfect picture, but it very well could be happening. And again, it's not going to happen, but the only thing that's going to solve that is getting rid of VAR. And it won't happen. But I think my point is we've dug ourselves into such a deep hole with VAR that the only way to get out of it is to completely remove the hole itself. And it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
But this is why I've been saying for much longer than just this season that we have to play well enough that we can beat not only our opponent, but also VAR. Because in this case, we did create chances. We could have won this game on our own merit, and we did not. So that's kind of where I'm at.
And also, let's not pretend that VAR didn't have a real hand in helping us make a run to a Champions League final in 2019, because it did. It had a hand in helping.
I'm tired of that. That's 5 fucking years ago. I don't want to talk about that bullshit anymore. Okay?
Trust me, I hear you, but
no, dude. If you want to talk about that, then let's talk about the fucking ball bouncing off of Lucas Moura's shoulder and it being as he's getting knocked the fuck over against Sheffield United and it being called offsides when Kane scores. But don't talk to me about this. We had a fucking bounce off of Ben White's fucking fat, tanned face today. Mickey Van de Ven scores, and they decided, nah, that shit's offsides. Get out of here, bro. This is not even a conversation that I want to have right now. That's wild.
And Musa Sissoko in a Champions League final. I hear it. I get it. I get it. you have to, but to Caroline's point, you have to be good enough to beat the opponent and beat any decision that's going to go against you, and accept the ones that go for you.
Different conversations. Like, I'm not talking about a team from 5 years ago, right, that had a chance to do this, that, or the other thing. First off, Allison played out of his fucking skin that day. There was no way we were beating that guy. We had great opportunities that day and could not get past him. Shout to him. But Sissoko aside, fast forward 5 years, this shit hasn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse. Andrew, come on, man.
I agree with you. I agree. It's gotten worse.
I do feel bad for Mickey, in this situation, because I think we're just talking about the fact that we did try to make a comeback. Like, we really did make a good try at it. And I feel like he was a big part of that. Cootie was a big part of that. We were seeing players who were putting a lot of heart and soul into this performance. So it's frustrating from that aspect.
Any other final words on this match before we we're going to talk about the women's match, but there's a few other news and notes from the week that I just want to run through. Go ahead, Todd.
It was good to see Richie back. My favorite part about this entire match was when he truck sticked fucking Gabriel. It was wonderful. Happy day.
I can't disagree with.
That's a verb I'm not familiar with, I have to say.
Caroline, obviously not a Madden 04 player on her PlayStation or Xbox system. That's
easy.
Why.
I truck sticked somebody on Madden yesterday. What do you want from me?
Yeah, there you go. We'll get that explanation. No, we'll give you that explanation offline. Just before we move on to the women's game, I do want to mention Ange did confirm that Destiny Udogi's injury was suffered during training. It was non-contact. That was a little bit of news from last week that we did not have. We did just get a little bit more detail on the nature of the injury. Not pretty, not something you want to hear. Doesn't mean that overuse is not a contributing factor to it, something we discussed a little bit last week, but doesn't confirm it either. These things happen. It sucks. He's going to miss, obviously, the rest of the season and the Euros, but hopefully he is back and raring and ready to go for next season. So I just wanted to note that. And then the only other thing that Spurs kind of made news about this week is they announced they're going to be traveling to Japan during the preseason. And we'll travel to Tokyo, face reigning J-League champions Vissel Kobe on July 27th. It is the team's first trip to Japan in 33 years. They also have already planned to travel to Korea in August, and they will also be hosting Bayern Munich in August at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So preseason plans coming together. Obviously, there's that match against Newcastle for some reason in the postseason. I wouldn't even call that preseason. That's a postseason friendly as after the season. But those are kind of the only other real news and notes. We will get to kits if we have time, but I do want to talk about this women's match today, Caroline, because this was like early on as we're watching. First of all, we said it last week. Sucks that we had to watch both of these matches at the same exact time. Sucks for folks who had to decide which of these two matches to attend because they were played at the same exact time. But this match also did not start out really well, and a late Beth England equalizer in the 81st minute gets it to a 1-1 scoreline. So Spurs women do get a point against Brighton. But for as much as we were able to pay attention to both of these matches, this looked kind of similar to other matches where a lot of the ball, a lot of the attack, but just not a lot of finishing until the very end, right?
And also conceding on a set piece because we're just a total broken record as a club right now.
It's the Tottenham way, right?
Yes, but the bad thing about watching these games simultaneously is that we conceded the first goals almost at the same time. So that was just like a double whammy of pain. But I do think that this is one we should have come away with the 3 points. And I think Robert Villahan said that, after the game, that a draw feels good in the sense that we did go down early, but we really did enough to deserve 3 points, I think, and just didn't have the finishing. But I do think the subs that we had in the second half really made a difference. I mean, especially Ash Neville with her assist was just a gorgeous cross. I thought she brought a lot of energy. I don't know. It was interesting to see the starting lineup because we had already known that Celine Bissett wasn't going to play. You know, she's being held out kind of precautionarily. She's got like a minor foot injury. And then Martha and Drew were both going to be kind of game day decisions. And ultimately they didn't make the squad. You know, I really feel like we could have used both of them in this game. But I do think we still had quality on the pitch, even with Ash Neville being rested from the start of the game. You know, Charlie Grant came in and I thought played a really great game. She had a couple of chances to score. So it's good to see kind of the, you know, attack contributing from the fullback position still. And Matilda Vinberg, I thought, again, was just making so many good things happen. And I was a little disappointed to see her sub off as early as she did. But, you know, we never know what the situation is fitness wise with these players. Like it could just be a case of her needing, you know, to get a rest because she has been playing heavy minutes lately. But I don't know what y'all's observations were. Like you said, it's hard to watch two games at once and have firm opinions on anything tactically, to be quite honest.
I mean, I just thought it was finishing was the issue. You mentioned the couple chances from Charlie Grant. The one early on, this was even before Brighton had scored their goal, was just point blank range, and she just pulled it wide, which was unfortunate. It was a little bit of a frustrating performance for me overall. But to your point, you fall down, you battle back. These matches, and I'm interested in how you guys feel about this. These matches leading up to the FA Cup final feel like tune-up games. Like the position in the WSL table is important, but it's important in the sense that you want to maintain it, not that you're trying to chase into the European places or you're fighting off anything below you. It's very much stand pat, get ready for an FA Cup final, and now there's one more match ahead of that match, which is next week against Everton. That's kind of the way it felt like this was almost treated, with, like you said, Caroline, some of the absences maybe a little bit cautionary than they needed to be in some sense, but overall just trying to gear up for what is going to be the match of all matches against Manchester United in a few weeks.
Yeah, it's well said, Andrew. I think, you know, earlier when I said that the women's result was, you know, something that was more digestible than the men's result, right? If you think about points being dropped, was for that exact reason. I think we have a lot to play for on the women's side, and these games are important, but they're not going to contribute to where we finish, right? So, and I'll be honest, I think I had the derby on the TV, and I had the women's match on my iPad in front of me, right? So I think like my attention definitely gravitated to the North London Derby throughout these two matches, but we really had a very mirrored performance to the men's result statistically, right? On the women's side, we had a ton of the ball, we outshot them 7-3, equal big chances. Actually, they had one more than us, right? But double their passes. So again, just an instance of us playing really well and not taking chances and coming away with a point. But again, the women are in a much better position to move on from their point than men are from the 3 points dropped today in the derby.
When did you become Stat Boy Scott? Like this is really jarring for me. You've been busting out all of the stats during this podcast, and I'm just like,
hey,
wow,
man,
I think it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, maybe
it is, right. It's the way that I handle the defeat, but no, you know, they're there. I think I'm often disinterested, but when you look at the issues, I think really what it is when you look at the issues, especially on the men's side, but across both teams, it all points to exactly what statistics tell you, right? So I think as somebody who's very interested in figuring out why we're not performing well, stats help, right?
Yeah. The other thing I'll add is just to kind of echo what you said, Andrew. I think we're expecting to see a little more experimentation with the lineups in these games leading up to the final, because, you know, Robert wants to have the full picture of, you know, what different players can offer, who he can rely on in the big moments. So I don't have a problem with, you know, for example, Ellie Brazil getting her first minutes in ages. Like, why not? You know, why not see if she could be an impact sub? I don't think she will be, but, you know, it's a try.
To that point, Beth England in an interview with the club after mentioned that she was essentially playing winger in this match to make way for player Jess Naz through the. By the way, Jess Naz, congrats on 100 appearances with the club after this match as well. It's another tip of the cap. But Beth England kind of made the comment that like that's not her game. She's not used to playing out there. She hasn't played out wide in a while, but that's what the manager asked her to do, and that's what she was doing. It was an interesting. I don't want to say it was a shot, but it was an interesting little bit of honesty from the captain in saying, yeah, we're trying things out. We're trying to figure out the mix, especially with a few different players missing, including Martha Tom. I think that's notable is what I'll say. I don't think it's glaring, but it's something just to note that, yeah, they're trying to mix some things up right now and kind of see what sticks. It's the spaghetti theory. You got to stick it on the wall and make sure it's fully cooked, right?
Right. And I don't think it was, like you said, a really pointed comment. I think it was just Beth being typically candid. She doesn't have a filter in that sense. But, with Martha not playing in this game, we probably would have expected to see Beth, at least move back to the 10, if not up into striker. But to me, it was more about getting Grace back in after missing a game out and wanting to let Matilda kind of capitalize on the momentum that she's been building up. So for that reason, it made sense to put her back out on the wing and let, Jess continue to play at striker where she's been playing really well. So can't really find too much fault with the strategy behind it, especially if you're looking at it as preparation for the biggest game in the team's history.
No question about it. As we mentioned, Spurs Women on the road next Wednesday at Everton. The men also have a pair of road trips ahead. They travel to Stamford Bridge on Thursday to face Chelsea and then up to Anfield to play Liverpool on Sunday. Before we get out of here, I thought we would have a little fun. We did this last week when Spurs 2024-25 home kit was leaked. There you see the home kit that we showed you last week. This week we have the away kit to show you. And what do we think, guys? This is what we're dealing with here. Todd says woof. He's not a fan.
No. I can't possibly imagine. Like, they showed us something that was actually attractive 3 or 4 days ago, right? That looked very similar to this, but not this. And then this thing came out, and it's like, how are we supposed to be excited about this? I don't know, man. It looks like it should be a Tommy Bahama shirt. I don't know, dude. It's not great.
For the listeners on the pod, we are showing the leaked kit, footy headlines, but I think this me like someone was trying to print something and it ran out of ink a little bit. The biggest issue I have with it is the badge in the center of the kit and not over on the left side over the heart. I'm a big proponent of badge over the heart, but other than that, I do like that we get a dark blue AIA instead of red. I'm a fan of that, which we see a lot on the away kits. The other big kind of talking point that we got from this was the original kind of leaks that we saw did not have any yellow on the sleeves. This kit has a stripe of yellow, which I kind of actually dig. It gives it a nice little pop. I feel like if it was all white and light and dark blues, it would kind of blend in, but I think the yellow gives it a little pop. What do we think, Scott? Where are you at with this away kit?
It's an awful kit, just absolutely terrible. I think I would say that I don't understand how you could take a club seriously that wears this kit, and I don't know why we're not taken seriously as a club when it comes to our kit designs, because that is just a really, really, really bad kit.
It looks like it should be made out of straight polyester and have a butterfly collar. Like, it's so bad.
It's
like
bad.
It's like I'm trying to think of like how you're gonna like make it less shitty, and it's because it's not symmetrical. Like, that's my biggest part about it is it's not symmetrical. If it made sense, it would still be a bad kit, but at least you could be like, okay, well, I can see where you're going. But literally, to Andrew's point, the middle of the right side of the chest just looks naked, and it doesn't match the left side of the chest, so it looks awful. So then that
I hadn't noticed that it wasn't symmetrical until you just said it, which is on me. But my God, that is really glaring now that you pointed out.
It's so bad. But like to my very point at the beginning of this discussion, Andrew, if you go back to the leaks of like what the initial thing looked like coming out the first time, I was a big fan of that one. I thought it looked great. Do you have that on tap? No,
I don't have that on tap. Sorry, because it's not real. It's not real. Caroline,
Well,
talk some sense in this.
I don't.
my hope is that this was the earlier prototype, the one you just showed us, and the one that Todd and I like is actually the finished product, because it does look much cleaner to me. Like even the pattern had more like visual texture to it.
Thank you.
It looked more polished, and I think my issue with Nike is that whenever we like ask for more detail and more interest to the kits, they do like the most random thing possible, like cutting off half of the collar, putting the badge in the middle, adding yellow for like 5 little centimeters of fabric. I'm like, there's no point. I don't like it.
No,
to your point. To your point. No, wait for the third kit, because the Nike check is going to be like turned on its side, and I think that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I think I made the joke in our group chat earlier in the week. Like, the one thing you always want to do when you have a really iconic brand and logo is change it. Like, what are we doing?
They're really scraping the well with this, logo flip thing. I don't get it. And like Todd said, this looks cheap. It looks cheap, and that is exactly the problem with Nike kits compared to another kit maker who I won't name, but we all know who it is, who actually uses nice fabrications, and that is like a huge selling point of their kit. So
Nike. Yeah, Nike does way too much, and folks in Oregon maybe have their head in the clouds at times, and maybe that's something to do with why we see what we consistently see out of the Nike brand. But Caroline,
are you accusing the fine folks at Nike of such a weed and coming up with kit designs? Is that what you're saying right now?
Well, probably not while they're at work. Probably after hours. All right, I don't want anyone to get in trouble here, but in all seriousness, Caroline had mentioned the word superfluous in our chat, and there is not a better word to pin on what we see from Nike's kit designs over and over and over for Tottenham Hotspur. And it's interesting. There's some Nike designs out there that are okay in general. They're all pretty poor, right? But we just get absolutely raked over the coals every single season as a club when it comes to our kit designs. I don't think we've had a good kit since Under Armour. I think the year that we achieved 86 points. That year was some just fire kits, just super nasty kits, right? But ever since then, they've been consistently poor, and we can blame Nike for that.
2 out of 3 that are shit, Scotty. You get 1 decent kit a year, from my perspective, from Nike, from Spurs. But every year you've got one that you go, why? Just fucking why?
Bring back Under Armour. Everybody knows you need a Baltimore-based kit maker in order to have your head on straight. You can't be going to those potheads. You can't be going to those potheads up in Oregon, right, Scott? You gotta be sensible and blue collar like those fine folks in Baltimore. That's gonna do it. I've had enough. This has been too long and too good of a podcast for me to let it go off the rails with me bitching and moaning about kits from now on. We'll have a lot to talk about next week. Obviously, we'll have 3 matches. We're not gonna do it after the Chelsea match. We're going to do those in tandems. It's just too much to digest, but we'll be back with you next Sunday for another podcast to recap hopefully what is not a ton of carnage on the road for Spurs, both on the men's and women's side. We will hope to collect some points away from home, because it did not go as well at home. Only 1 point amongst the 2 teams this weekend. But for Todd, he can be found at TC_Kasho. Scott is at Scott G Bird. You can follow Caroline at CG Stefko. Follow me at A Stetka. Follow us at Tottenham Depot. Leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, and go follow our YouTube, streaming them live. We're doing it live, and we're streaming them. We're putting them up there for you to watch the pod. We're giving you visual aids. We're giving you video clips. We're giving you everything we can right now to talk Spurs as we head into the run-in and these final few matches of the season as we barrel toward the summer. The weather's heating up, and so is the Spurs talk here at the Tottenham Depot. Until next week, we will see you then. This has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.